Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda, and hello, Cai.
Hi, David.
Hi, David, and welcome to episode 277 to our listeners around the country and across the world. Today we have a special guest, as all our guests are special. But this is an extra special guest because he's been on our show before, Cai Chen, who is a psychiatrist. The last time we had you on the show, Cai, you were in your residency. Mm-hmm. And so now I understand you've graduated and you've passed your boards. And so you're looking up. Is that accurate? You've passed?
No, I haven't taken my board exam yet.
Oh, you haven't?
I just applied for it. So.
Okay. But you have graduated from your residency. Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, congratulations. I got so nervous before my boards. I thought I had a lymphoma in my armpit and actually went to the emergency room and demanded an x-ray. And then they said, there's nothing in your armpit. Are you upset about something? And I said, oh, my oral boards in psychiatry are next week in Minneapolis. That must be it. I remember lifting a heavy suitcase when I was in London too, and kind of pulling a muscle, and it was radiating around to my armpit. But that's a big deal. But funny, also, one cool thing is that Cai used to be in Texas and still is licensed in Texas. And so if you need an awesome team therapist in Texas, he's probably the first and only one, but can work through teletherapy. And now we're overjoyed that you've joined us here in California and in the Bay Area, and you're working at the Feeling Good Institute, Mountain View. And so if somebody in the California is looking for an awesome team therapist, Cai's a good, brilliant, fantastic therapist. And also you can get him early in his career when he's still attracting patients before he has a long waiting list. So if you're feeling depressed, and that might be, he might be somebody to check into, which you will find out how awesome he is on this podcast.
Cool. Well, before we dive in with you, Cai, I'm going to read 2 podcast endorsements. They're both about the episodes. Actually, I'm going to just read one. One about episodes 268 and 269, which were the episodes on how Carly Zankman was discussing wanting to be a mother. And we got a lot of letters and emails about that because it was such a heartfelt topic that touched a lot of people. And here's somebody that wrote, "Hello, Dr. Carly. I felt compelled to send you a note after listening to the 2 episodes on David's podcast this evening." And again, these were episodes 268 and 269. "I knew little about ectopic pregnancies and was feeling so much sadness and concern as you were sharing your story. I was relieved and hopeful knowing you were able to get pregnant again. I can only imagine the heightened level of concern after such a trauma first go-round. I hope things are going well for you several weeks later. Thank you for sharing your story and for your courage to do so in such a public way. I run a group therapy practice in San Jose, and we use the TEAM model in our work. I haven't listened to many of the podcast episodes, but these 2 called out to me on a personal level. I also have a sad fertility story, but in short, my perfect IVF embryo son was stillborn at 22 weeks in February of 2021. I also developed incredibly severe preeclampsia and was close to death myself. I understand I'm sharing this with you just so you know that someone out there down the road understands the tremendous loss of hopes and dreams you must have experienced, but also the medical trauma you underwent. I wish these things didn't happen, but I'm grateful that when they do, more of us are bringing these terrible, unexpected events into the light so we can all collectively heal."
Well, thank you for that, and such a beautiful note. And thank you, Carly, for sharing your heart and your sorrows and your trauma. I'm sure you've touched the hearts of, I think, well over 20,000 people have now downloaded your podcasts, and also this person who's in group practice in San Jose might want to consider joining us in our Tuesday group at Stanford. We would love to have you.
And then I want to read another podcast episode endorsement, because I think it's going to influence what we're talking about today. And this is from Evan. The first podcast endorsement that I just read, I didn't have that person's name, but this is from Evan, and he wrote about Secrets of Self-Esteem, which was episode 230. And this is brief. He wrote, "Thank you so much for the work you do, David. Feeling good is such a simple but monumental revolution for my overthinking mind. I feel so passionate about your discovery of and implementation of resistance to change in psychotherapy. I'd read about some of this in the book Conversations with Milton Erikson, but I still didn't know exactly what he was doing or fully understand the dynamics of it. But you've established it with such easy to understand structure that it's much more accessible to lay people for immediate healing. So I want to thank you, Evan."
Well, thank you, Evan. I appreciate that. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses, and my weaknesses are extensive. But one of my strengths, I think, is explaining things in simple terms. I think I'm kind of a slow learner, so I have to work at things before I finally get them, before I grasp it. But once I grasp it, then I understand it and I can explain it to others. And I get a lot of joy in doing that. And I'm so glad that the explanation of the two types of resistance were outcome resistance and process resistance, and how they can differ from depression and anxiety and so forth. And I'm seeing now a lot of people are picking up on my concepts of outcome resistance and process resistance. My only disappointment is so many people quote my ideas, but then they never say this came, or they don't, I won't say they never say, but they usually don't say this was created by Dr. David Burns. And my narcissism calls out and says, please, use my stuff and use my ideas. And that's what I'm trying to make happen, but give me a little credit for it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, last time you were on the podcast, Cai, I think we were talking about your desire to be in a long-term loving relationship with someone and some concerns that you were going through. And I understand that now your situation about that has changed. And maybe it's partly because of the topic that we're talking about. We decided to talk today about rejection practice. And I wanted to ask you to first just tell us, what is rejection practice and when and why would you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, thank you so much, both of y'all, for having me back on the show. It's always such a pleasure and a real honor to be here, just being around such warm and loving people. And in terms of rejection practice, it's one of the many tools, of which there's 50 to 100 if you're counting, tools to help with overcoming something like social anxiety, particularly people who have difficulties with loneliness or flirting or just aren't having very much luck out in the dating world. And to kind of take this back a little bit and mention about how this applies not only to patients, but how it also applies to myself. I used this technique actually on myself about last year. At that time, COVID had hit, and I was convinced to myself that I had to do something about my social anxiety. And this is the best time, the best time when everyone's hunkering down in an isolation to work on my social anxiety. So I was like, I signed up for a dating app, Tinder, and that really freaked me out. I was panicking. I thought like people at my work would find out that I was on Tinder or something like that, and they like judge me and look down on me. but I got through that, and through the help of David Burns's work, especially his book Intimate Connections, which I really highly recommend to anyone who's super lonely and wants to find someone in their life. Go read that book. That really helped me. I had dated quite a few people online, and it was pretty fun, but it wasn't like actually meeting people in person, and that kind of thing. And eventually I told myself, okay, well, I'm doing this online kind of thing and I'm used to it now. I'm not scared of that anymore, but I actually have to put myself out there and like actually talk with women in real time. And I made sure that it was safe. I put on a mask and everything. That was back before the COVID vaccine. And
Hi,
so,
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So when you say dating online, does that mean you were exchanging emails and texts with people, but not meeting them in person?
Yeah, I was doing that. And some of them ended up becoming dates in person.
Okay.
But not all of them. And yeah, that's what Tinder is.
Okay.
Yeah. And so after a while, I thought to myself, okay, well, this is working okay. But I also want to get over my fear of actually talking with women in public, because like I still didn't know how to really do that. And I was still scared to death. And I said, oh, okay, I'll work on that. I'll do that. And then three or 4 months passed, I still didn't do it. And because I was terrified,
what did you not do?
I told myself I have to like put myself out there rather than just like going on a dating app. It's just like, if I find someone like attractive and I want to ask for her phone number or something, just go up to her and just ask her for her phone number.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I was too terrified of doing that. I was like, oh God, people are going to think that I'm kind of way too forward, and I'm going to be bothering any woman that I ask for their phone number, and they're going to reject me. It's going to be terrible, et cetera, et cetera. So those were a lot of my anxious thoughts during that time.
I'm writing them down. Let me get all three. The first, I'll be too forward. And then what was the second one?
I'll be too forward. And I think the second one that I mentioned was that
they'll be offended or something.
Yeah. The woman will be offended that I even went up to ask. Oh yeah. And other people will be offended too.
Oh yeah, sure.
Go up and ask a woman randomly in public. So yeah, those were a lot of my fears, but I told myself I'm going to do this, and 3 or 4 months passed. I still didn't do it. And then finally I just said, I had one patient actually who had similar problems, and I wanted to use those techniques with him. But then I realized I don't even know how to do this technique. I don't know how to like do something like rejection practice, for instance, or like flirting techniques, or some of these other really great tools for social anxiety. So I told myself I have to force myself to do it in order to help my patient. So finally, I told myself I'm going to do rejection practice, because that seems like the hardest one possible. And I drove myself to a local mall, and I got out and I told myself, okay, I'm allowed to freak out one time. But after that, I have to go back out. So I literally walked around the mall just like sweating bullets, and I did not ask any women out. And then I went back to my car. I was freaking out. I said, okay, you got your one time of freaking out. You have to get back out of the car. You have to get back to the mall, and you have to go and talk with some women. So that's what I did. I went into the mall. And the way you set up rejection practice, this is the way that I did. I would introduce myself. I said, hey, hi there. I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I wanted to ask you something real quick. Would that be okay? And if usually they said yes. If they said no, then I said, thanks, I really appreciate your help. I took out my little notebook and I put a tally over there to tally down the number of rejections that I was getting. And then if they said yes, I'd say, okay, thanks. And then I would do a little bit of self-disclosure. I'd say, that, to tell you the truth, I have pretty bad social anxiety. I get really nervous around attractive women such as yourself. But I've decided to overcome that by doing something called rejection practice, and I need your help. I need 20 rejections. Can you help me today? And most of them were pretty good eggs. They were like, oh, or some of them kind of looked at me weird. And it was like, okay, what do you want? And I was like, oh yeah, can I have your phone number? And quite a few of them said no. And I was like, oh, great. So, and then I took out my notebook. I tallied down one rejection. I said, thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it. And then I would walk off and find another woman that I was attracted to and do the same thing. And it was it was a fun experience, because sometimes it was intriguing to the people I was talking to. They were asking me, it felt like I was getting closer to people because we were just having fun, and it felt like a fun thing to do. And sometimes it led to a lot of conversations about social anxiety, about whether they had social anxiety too, and if they had difficulties with dating. A lot of it was just no, I'm married, or no, I have a boyfriend already. And but it was great. I actually managed to snag 2 phone numbers doing that. And one of them turned into a very brief kind of short relationship, but it didn't last. But it was very liberating for me, and made me realize that I was maybe taking myself a little bit too seriously, and that I have to give other people a little bit more credit, and not expect them to immediately judge me just for, asking them something relatively simple. It's just telling someone that they're attractive and asking for their phone number. You have to do it with some skill, and you have to dress nicely, of course. You can't just look very slobbish while doing it. But it was a very useful technique for myself. I'm really glad that I did it.
That is such a neat story. Yeah. And did you said that you were trying to get over your fear of their rejection? Did you say that you wanted them to reject you, or?
Yes, I did. I said because some of them asked me, I was like, wait, so you want me to reject you? And I said, yes, can I have your phone number? And they would say,
yeah.
They would say, no, I don't want to give you my phone number. It's like, okay, thank you. And then I would walk away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
neat. How many times do you think you did that?
I gave myself a goal of collecting 20 rejections in 1 week. But I was so excited, and I felt so good doing it. I ended up collecting 40 or so.
Oh my gosh.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Do you know the history of rejection practice?
I think a little bit. You mentioned some of it on the podcast, Albert Ellis, for instance.
Yeah.
He went around New York.
Right.
Asking 100 women out.
Yeah. 200 he asked out in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said they all, but he didn't say he wanted their rejection. He just asked them out. So your version is much cooler and more awesome. But he said only one of them accepted a date with him. All the other 199 rejected him, and the one who accepted a date with him didn't show up. So he got over his fear of rejection. But I did something similar, never having heard of Albert Ellis, when I was a medical student. There was this really neat guy, and I wish I could find him again, Spider Evans. His nickname was Spider. He was about 18 or 19, a really neat, good-looking guy, but like me, he was super shy, and he lived in a garage behind this house that where I was living with a bunch of people, and we went out for about 2 weeks. And I just skipped medical school classes, and we just went all over Palo Alto and San Francisco, taking turns, forcing each other to go up and ask someone out. And we both also collected 100% rejection rate during those two weeks. But when I heard of you, the way you do it, that you actually tell them you're trying to get over your fear of rejection, would appreciate it if they would please reject you, I jump for joy, because that is such a tremendous enhancement of this technique. Makes it a lot more fun and a lot more warm and kind of enjoyable for you and the people that you're talking to. Now, could women do this too, Cai, or is this mainly just for guys?
That's a really good question. I actually haven't tried that kind of thing with any women patients or female patients. So I'm not sure. I think it could be applicable. And that my honest guess would be that some women who are very attractive would usually have the opposite problem. They would be having more guys chasing after them. But that may be something that they want.
I work with tremendous numbers of single women and single men. When I had my practice, 60% of my people were single and not in loving relationships. And but with the women, I just taught them, flirting practice, and maybe change the way you look a little bit, and don't be afraid to get some, really cool, sexy clothes. And you don't have an identity. You are not this or that. So you can be a variety of things. You can be flirtatious. You can be serious. You can be bitchy. You can be, all kinds of things. And women were actually easier to work with because they understood clothing, they understood flirting. But the guys were often much more stubborn and set in their ways and had to be pushed harder.
Oh, that's true.
It's so neat what you did. I'm just so happy for you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And I love the point that you brought up about men being very resistant about that, because I was pretty resistant, and that was one of my biggest problems. I didn't know how to flirt with women because I didn't want to. I thought it was kind of beneath me.
Yes, right. That type of self-righteous defensiveness. Yeah.
Hey, Cai, I have a question for you. We started talking about with the endorsement I wrote about David creating, the understanding of how people resist change. And so if you're working with a shy client or somebody who's not involved in the dating world, is this something that you do right away with them? Like when they walk into your office, you'd say, hey, I have this idea about rejection practice, or how would it fit in with the whole team model?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Of course, with TEAM, you always do testing first, and then you do empathy, and then you do A for assessment of resistance or agenda setting before you jump into the methods. I would say that I would be cautious about recommending immediately jumping into doing that technique with someone who literally just walked into the office with me. However, if that person I've already talked with that person, like in an initial evaluation, or we know each other a little bit, and I have some good empathy with that person, I think it would be very appropriate to say, rather than wait 1 or 2 weeks to do this, we can do this right now. I'll be with you every step of the way. I've done this myself, and let's go out there and just give it a try and see what happens, and that kind of thing. So I think it would be very appropriate after you make sure that you have that kind of connection with the person, they trust you, and also a couple of other things to consider in terms of loneliness and wanting to find a partner and that kind of thing. The other part too is to, and I like what you mentioned in intimate connections, David, about negotiating with the person, about giving up the need for love. Yes, that you have to tell them I have lots of really good tools and techniques that I could use for you that could turn your love life from rags to riches and get women or men chasing after you in endless numbers. However, if you want those tools and those techniques, you have to be willing to love yourself first. You have to give yourself something that first, rather than try to get it from someone else. And if the person's willing to do that, then you can use those techniques. So
that's cool. Another tip I think would be to know who you're working with. All the ideas in TEAM are powerful, but they're all nuanced. They're not simple, and they require a lot of judgment and a lot of connection between the therapist and the patient. And there are some people for whom I wouldn't recommend this technique. Sometimes people don't have good, social skills. They don't come across in a positive or effective way toward others. They might be frightening toward others. You don't want to send someone out to do something that's going to be hurtful to them or result in, unintended negative consequences. Because we have so many tools. There's actually more than 100 tools that we're using now. I think it's like Angela Poach did a count. I think she came up with 125 on the latest list or something like that. But there's a lot of ways to be helpful to people. Also, I just had the thought, yes, I've had a lot of shy women, and yes, I do teach something similar. Like you can kind of flirt with a guy. You can, you can do flirting training. You can, tell a guy, listen, or anyone, on the hikes. I was doing this with women all the time when I have my Sunday hikes that I hope to reinstitute once I can get my walking back up to some reasonable distance again. But to go up to strangers and say, listen, could I talk to you for a minute? I'm really shy, and I'm often hiding my shyness out of a sense of shame and thinking it means there's something wrong with me, or people are going to think I'm weird. But I decided to get over my shame and start telling people today. And that's why I'm telling you. And this way, you don't put the other person in the position of having to be nice to you or having to, say something encouraging. And that has been incredibly effective for women and for men. But again, they've got to be pushed because they wimp out at the last minute. And they don't want to do what I'm asking them to do. So I have to stop someone that we approach on the hike and just say, could we stop you for just a second here? This young lady needs to talk to you for a minute. And then I kind of force them into it, and then it happens. And, 99% of the time they get just wonderful feedback from others. And it is so helpful. And it doesn't have to be asking for a date. It can be just to share with you this shameful thing that you've been hiding all of your life. Shame goes along with shyness and many forms of anxiety. Low self-esteem goes along with depression, but shame is the thing that goes along with anxiety. Have you felt shame about the shyness as well as the shyness?
That's to you, Cai.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your point that you can't just it depends on your clinical judgment too. You can't just throw this thing kind of things out at people. And there was one colleague that I worked with quite a while back. He actually was very motivated, and he said, I want to give rejection practice a try. And he was pretty successful. Except for one time when he was in one neighborhood and the woman was really frightened and she called the police.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to be careful with a lot of these things and make sure you're not coming across in a threatening or aggressive way to other people. Listen, I had an idea of something we could do here for fun is illustrate the feared fantasy technique.
Oh, yeah, great. Sure.
And in the feared fantasy, that's rejection practice, feared fantasy rejection. You meet the woman from hell who is all the things that you're afraid of. And she says all those horrible things that you're the most afraid of hearing. And that can be Rhonda. And then I can be the observer from hell who's incredibly offended by your attempts to talk to Rhonda. So you can hit two birds with one stone. But the way we would do this is, what are you afraid if you're just talking to Rhonda, you meet her on the street? What would your worst fear, what would this woman say to you?
The worst fear would be, you're assaulting me and I'm going to call the police on you.
You're insulting or assaulting?
You're assaulting me. You're assaulting me. I'm going to call the police on you.
Yeah. And what else?
Let's see. Another worst fear would probably be I don't know. It's like it's kind of hard to come up with other scary things.
Well, could she say you're repulsive? You're the last person in the world I would date. You know what's the worst?
Sure, we'll go with that. You're the last person that I would ever want to ask out on a date.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah.
How about you're being too forward? That's what you said in the beginning.
Oh yeah. And you're being too forward.
Mm-hmm.
And another one would be I know that you're actually really insecure. That's why you're asking me this.
Okay, this is great. And remember, we have to clarify for our listeners what we're doing. In the feared fantasy, you get to. It's not practice for real life because this won't happen in real life. The feared fantasy person is really just a projection of your own fears and insecurities about yourself. But you get a chance to meet the monster you fear the most so you can discover that the monster has no teeth. That's the whole idea behind the feared fantasy. And then I'll be the feared fantasy observer. And, I'll be saying, I saw you trying to flirt with that woman, Rhonda. And then I might say things like, I'm offended that you're approaching women you don't know. What else would I be saying?
It's inappropriate in broad daylight.
Yeah. And then you could say, oh, yes, I prefer to do it in the dark. What else would I say? What would I say? I've got two bullets in my gun. I need one more.
Oh, well, one more to put in the chamber. Gotcha. Let's see. Something that someone else would say that they're offended. You shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, you just shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. Yeah. So, okay, you want to start out as yourself?
Yeah, sure. I can start as myself.
Okay, and so Rhonda, let's say you've said something, whatever, to Rhonda, and now she's going to rip into you and see how you handle it.
Okay. Be gentle, but don't be too gentle.
So do you going to start off by saying hello and say something to me, Cai?
Oh yeah. I would say, oh hi there, Rhonda. It's a little bit embarrassing for me, but I wanted to tell you something and ask for your help for something real quick. Would that be okay?
Oh, okay. I'm kind of busy, but sure, I could do it for a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Well, to tell you the truth, I have struggled with quite a bit of social anxiety, and in fact, I get really nervous around attractive women, such as yourself. But I've decided that I don't want to feel really nervous doing that anymore. I'm doing something called Rejection Practice, and I actually need to collect 20 rejections. I'm wondering if you could help me with that.
Well, I can totally understand why you want to practice with me because men are constantly coming up to me and asking me out for dates. And, to be perfectly honest, what's your name again? It's kind of, you're unforgettable. I mean, you're forgettable. You're just so repulsive. You're really the last person on earth that I'd ever date.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I've got lots of things about me that are kind of like a little bit quirky, if not like a little bit abnormal. We could actually spend a lot of time talking about that right now. If you really
actually, no.
To.
I mean, you're just so insecure. It's just like reeking off of you. And that's why you're doing this, because you're just so insecure. It's really uncomfortable to be around.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. You're right. And it sounds like I'm kind of, there's something about me that's really ticking you off. Is it the fact that I'm insecure, or is there? Well, what do you mean by that exactly?
I mean, really, what I'm saying is you're being so forward. You're too forward. You're actually so forward. I'm getting the feeling you're actually assaulting me, and if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to call the police.
Okay, gotcha. well, if that's the case, then I don't want to take up any more of your time. I think we'll just leave it at that. But thank you so much for being forward with me, because sometimes I'm not only am I undateable, I tend to be incredibly dense too. So I don't pick up on some of these things real quickly. So thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. And,
well, we better stop now before I call the police.
Okay. All right. And then I'll head out over here to stage right.
Okay, great. So who won, would you say, Cai?
I'd say, I won.
Big or small?
Big.
Big or huge?
I'd say huge.
Huge, right. I thought so too. How did you win huge, and what was the purpose of doing that, and what was the impact on you?
Well, I think I won huge by using a lot of acceptance. The acceptance paradox, just saying that, like those words that were kind of going towards me, like insecure, undateable, that kind of stuff, it didn't really feel like too threatening to me. So it's like, that's not too big of a deal. But I think that part with, like, when she told me, like, I'm going to call the police, I was like, okay, thanks for being forward. Like, I've gotten all the information I need.
Yeah, right. I thought you did great on that as well. And who looked like the jerk?
I think, well, it's kind of hard to say. Like, she was going to call the police on me. I guess Rhonda seemed a little bit jerky.
Yeah. And that's what one almost always discovers when doing the feared fantasy, that the person that you've been so afraid of, when you see that person in reality, people will never say these things, but if that did come to pass, it wouldn't be upsetting to you. It's just here's a person who's incredibly insecure herself and kind of hostile and socially, pretty inappropriate. But I'll be the observer. Cai, young man, could I talk to you for just a moment?
Absolutely, you can. I just got finished running away from the
looked to me like you were attracted to her, sexually attracted, and trying to pick her up. Is that true?
Actually, that is true. I was trying to get her phone number, to be honest.
Oh, well, I want you to know that I'm terribly offended that you did that, and I think that's entirely inappropriate, especially in the daylight. And I judge you because I feel you shouldn't be doing that.
Oh, okay. Well, that actually brings up a really good philosophical point. I'd love to talk about that with you. If you want to sit here and discuss it, like how would someone ask someone out then, if not in the broad daylight? Should I be like doing it like in the cover of darkness? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, you should not be trying to flirt and have sex with attractive women that you don't know.
Oh, okay.
That's profoundly immoral. My marriage was made up by my parents, who made an arrangement with the parents of my wife.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure how that dynamic worked out. But I respect you, and I think whatever works for you. God bless you. And I'm just not sure where you're getting at in terms of this. Is there something like, was there something that I said or that I did that really kind of ticked you off? Is it just because I'm trying to ask someone out? Is that it?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, okay. Well, do you judge and look down on everyone who tries to ask a pretty lady out?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I find it profoundly offensive.
Well, talk to you then. You keep being offended about it. And I'm just going to go ahead and keep trying because I'm lonely and I want companionship.
Yeah, but you're after sex too. I can sense that.
I'd say like me and 7 billion other people are actually the same thing.
Okay, so this is a humorous technique, but there's a logic behind it. And once again, just to point out the obvious to our listeners, Who looked like the jerk here?
Well, you did. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. And then how did you defeat me? You won bigger than huge. You won gargantuan. But how did you do that?
I think just like a kind of a little bit of like Socratic questioning is just like like what are you getting at?
Yes, right.
And then like revealing some of the illogical sort of silliness of that kind of premise of like, oh, it's so immoral and terrible and bad. You should not be asking someone out. You shouldn't be want to like have sex and want to have a relationship, and they're really wrong. That doesn't make any sense.
You can say that to me. Let's in a role reversal. Just say you shouldn't be interested in sex with attractive women.
All right, I gotta prep myself to be super mean. Okay. Yeah. All right. So
I know it's hard for you, huh, Cai?
Well, some people would say otherwise. Anyway, so David. I look down on you. I judge you because I noticed that you are attracted to women. In fact, I heard off the grapevine that you actually want to have sex with women.
Yes, very much so. Intensely so, especially when I'm horny.
And that's just a terrible, immoral thing to
really? Are you must be a Lutheran.
Oh, no, I'm even better than that. I'm like enlightened, and I do not need the usual kind of pleasures of the flesh.
I thought so because I saw you levitating a few minutes ago. I think you're the new Messiah. You're way out of my league, so if you can excuse me, I have to go and have sex with some women.
And I'll just stay here levitating.
But at any rate, thank you for that. And again, it's not just to be silly, although it's great to be silly and to have fun being silly. But often our fears really are based on a kind of cosmic joke. And the Buddhists even have a concept called laughing enlightenment, where when you confront your worst fear, you burst. When you stop running from it, I might say, because you were running from it like we all do. It took you months to work up to it. And then when you finally confront the thing you fear the most, and according to Buddhism, that you go through reincarnations over and over again, always running from your fears. And the day you finally confront your fears, you go into enlightenment because you discover that the monster has no teeth. So it is a mystical, spiritual quality, but it's a humor-based technique, and it's freeing. And when I'm working with people with this feared fantasy, rejection feared fantasy technique, then they must, like you, go out and actually do it in the real world. In other words, start flirting with women or men, whatever the case might be, confronting your fears and doing the stuff that's really hard in the real world.
And also to comment real quick in terms of this, the rejection practice technique. So it really afterwards, it really freed me up and made it so that anytime that I tried to do any sort of exposure technique with my patients, I had no fear whatsoever. So it was super easy.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So it's something that's very important for if any therapists are listening to this too, that if you want to try these techniques with your patients, you have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're scared, your patients will be scared too. And
exactly.
Get anywhere.
Exactly. And it's animal magnetism. You can tell, you can smell it when someone's, terrified. And when someone's relaxed, you can sense that too, as can an animal can sense that about you. And this is a spiritual notion. A physician from, I think it's probably a Christian notion, maybe it's New Testament, I'm not sure. There's something, physician, heal thyself, and I've always felt that is so important. But the fact that you have this social anxiety doesn't mean that you're screwed up and shouldn't be a psychiatrist.
Well, no, I guess it doesn't.
Why not?
Well, it's because a lot of people struggle with social anxiety, including psychiatrists and a lot of therapists. Also, we're all human. We all have our own traits and flaws, and just because we have one thing or another doesn't mean that we shouldn't do what we really want to do. But I would say that if people wanted to help other people in this way or wanted to help themselves, learning to use these techniques can be profoundly life-changing. It was for myself. After I did this, I gave up dating it for a while because I was just fed up with it. And that's when I met my current girlfriend, through the Tuesday group. We met in the breakout group. And then we kept talking and emailing, and then I ended up moving from Texas all the way over here to California. So that's why I'm here. I'm here for the love.
That's so neat. Yeah. And my own feeling is that all human beings. I've had 17 different so-called anxiety disorders, and I don't think it makes me not eligible to treat anxiety. I think it makes me way more qualified to treat anxiety, but you have to give the patient the message. I've had what you've had, and I know how to cure it. It's going to be a joy to lead you out of the woods and see you get joy and develop a wonderful dating life and find someone. And also, if any therapists are out there, remember our Tuesday group and Rhonda's Wednesday group. It's free, unlimited training for therapists from all over the world. And when you come to our groups, you get unlimited therapy too, free. And you love which you found in our Tuesday group. So that's another feature that we're offering.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, we'll put your contact information in the show notes, but a lot of people don't read the show notes. So if somebody should want to contact you and get some help for depression or anxiety or social anxiety, could you just give your email or something you can give verbally so people would know how to touch base with you?
Of course. So my email is my first name. That's spelled C-A-I. And so Cai at feelinggoodinstitute.com. So it's all Feeling Good Institute is one word. There's no spaces.
Awesome. Thank you.
And if you wanted to call my office, my clinic number is 916-877-4791.
Say that again. I'll write it down. Get it in the show notes. 916.
877.
4791. Well, thank you so much, Cai. It's always a joy to hang out with you. And today was no exception. Sometimes we cry together. Today we did a lot of laughing together, and those are two of my favorite things.
Cool. Yes, thank you so much, Cai. It was really a blast to have you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Till next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.